Welcome. Today, we're diving into the laws that surround marriage. But we're not talking about the happy stuff. We're looking at the really crucial protections the law puts in place to deal with serious offenses. We're going to go through them one by one so you can get a really clear picture of what the law protects against and why. So you might be asking, what protections are we even talking about? Well, think of these laws less like a bunch of restrictive rules and more like a shield. It's a shield designed to guard people against some pretty awful things, from deceit and coercion all the way to outright cruelty. So here's our game plan. We'll kick off with the main purpose of these laws, and then we're just going to walk through each major offense in order. We'll start with the tragedy of dowry death and end with the crime of forced marriage. My goal here is for you to walk away with a clear, sequential understanding of every offense and its consequences. All right, so what's the big idea behind all these regulations? It really boils down to one word: protection. These laws exist purely to protect the people in a marriage from being exploited or harmed. It's about making sure the whole institution isn't built on a foundation of fraud or fear. We're going to start with Section 80, which covers what is probably one of the most tragic and severe offenses related to marriage: dowry death. And you'll see the law is incredibly specific about this for a very good reason. So what exactly is a dowry death in the eyes of the law? It's not just any sad death that happens after a wedding. The definition is super precise. It has to be the death of a woman from something unnatural, like burns or a bodily injury. It has to happen within 7 years of her marriage, and, this is the clincher, it has to be directly linked to her being harassed over dowry demands shortly before she died. For a case to legally be considered a dowry death, the prosecution has to prove all 4 of these things. It's a really high bar. You have that strict 7-year time frame. The cause of death must be unnatural. There has to be proof of cruelty right before she died. And, the absolute key, that cruelty has to be tied directly to a demand for dowry. If you take away even one of those pieces, the whole legal definition just falls apart. And the punishment? Well, it absolutely reflects how serious this crime is. This is no minor offense. We are talking about a mandatory minimum of 7 years in prison, which can even be extended to a life sentence. Okay, so from the very real physical harm of dowry death, the law now pivots to another kind of violation: deceit. Sections 81, 82, and 83 all tackle different kinds of fraud that can completely undermine the foundation of a marriage. Now, Section 81 targets a very specific kind of con. It's about a man who tricks a woman into thinking they're legally married just so he can get her to live with him or have sex. The crime here isn't living together. It's the deliberate, calculated deception that got them there. And as you can see, the law takes this kind of fraud very seriously. Next up is Section 82, bigamy. You know, in simple terms, you just can't be married to more than one person at the same time. The law is super straightforward on this one, although there are a few rare exceptions, like if a spouse has been missing and unheard from for 7 whole years. And this is where it gets interesting because it shows how much intent matters in the law. Just committing bigamy can get you up to 7 years, but if you actively hide your first marriage from your new partner, that extra layer of deception bumps the maximum possible sentence up to 10 years. The final piece in this deceit puzzle is Section 83, the fraudulent ceremony. This is for when someone goes through with a whole wedding ceremony knowing full well that it's a total sham and not legally binding. It's the act of performing the fraud itself that's the crime here, and that's punishable by up to 7 years. So we've seen how the law punishes lies and deceit at the very start of a marriage. Now we're going to shift gears to harmful acts that can happen within a marriage. Sections 84 to 86 deal with cruelty and interference from the outside. Section 84 is pretty interesting because it's not about the husband or wife, but about a third party. The crime here is when someone entices or lures a married woman away from her husband with the specific goal of having an affair. The law is basically trying to protect the marriage from being maliciously broken up by an outsider. And now we get to Section 85, which is a massive protection against domestic abuse. It makes it a criminal offense for a husband, or even a relative of the husband, to be cruel to a married woman. The punishment is up to 3 years in prison, plus a fine. But what does the law actually mean by cruelty? Well, Section 86 gives us a really powerful 2-part definition. First, cruelty can be any act that is so severe it could literally drive a woman to suicide or cause serious harm to her, mentally or physically. Second, and this ties back to what we talked about earlier, it includes harassing her to try and force her or her family to hand over property or valuables. So the law is clear. Deep psychological abuse and financial coercion are both forms of cruelty.
And that brings us to our final offense under Section 87, which deals with the incredibly serious issue of forced marriage. This law is all about protecting a woman's basic right to choose who and when she gets married. This section is crystal clear. It is a major crime to kidnap or abduct a woman with the goal of forcing her to marry someone against her will. The law also lumps in forcing or tricking her into illicit intercourse under the same offense. So the key things here are the act of abduction itself and the clear intent to force her into something. And the punishment for this violation of personal freedom is, as it should be, severe, up to 10 years in prison plus a fine. It really shows how seriously the law takes the act of forcing someone into a marriage.
Okay, wow, we have covered a ton of ground, from dowry death to deceit and cruelty. Now, to make sure this all sticks and is really easy to remember in sequence, let's pull it all together into one simple summary.
This table right here, this is your ultimate cheat sheet. You can see every single offense we talked about from Section 80 all the way to 87 lined up right next to its punishment. You can see how the severity changes from that minimum of 7 years for dowry death all the way down to up to 2 years for enticement. Seeing it all laid out in order like this just makes the whole framework so much easier to understand.
So, when you step back and look at all of these laws together, you really see the full picture. This isn't just a random list of things you can't do. It's a comprehensive legal shield, and it's designed to protect people from very specific kinds of harm and to uphold the integrity of marriage itself. And this really leaves us with one last big question to think about. Having these laws on the books is the first crucial step. But how do we, as a society, make sure these protections are actually effective in the real world? Because that takes more than just laws and courts. It requires all of us to be aware of these rights and committed to making sure they're upheld. Definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me.